The wind, a palpable entity of malice, didn't just claw. It seized Evelyn, slamming her with brutal force against the unforgiving, ice-slicked brickwork of the March Motors dealership. The grand, arrogant edifice her father had built, now a symbol of her exile. She crumpled, a blinding supernova of pain erupting in her lower back, radiating down her legs. Her gloved hand, an instinct older than thought, flew to shield her swollen belly, a desperate protective barrier. The impact jarred her teeth until they rattled, making stars explode behind her eyelids. "You're a degenerate disgrace, a worthless eyesore polluting our establishment." The security guard, a bull-necked man named Henderson, whose name tag glinted mockingly, spat the words, his face a mask of florid, contemptuous rage. He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh like talons, yanking her violently toward the treacherous curb. "Get lost before I have you arrested for trespassing, vagrancy, and creating a public nuisance. One call, lady, and you'll be explaining your fitness as a mother to Child Protective Services from a jail cell." He shoved her again, a final brutal punctuation to his venom, and she stumbled, her already strained ankle giving way. She landed hard, crashing onto her knees, on the frozen, unforgiving pavement, and the sickening crack of her kneecap against the concrete, echoing in the sudden, ringing silence. Her worn leather satchel containing her last few dollars and a cherished, faded photograph of her father skittered across the ice, its contents spilling. The explicit threat of social services of losing her precious, unborn child before it even drew its first breath ignited a primal, visceral terror in Evelyn. "No, not my baby. You will not take my baby from me." The words were a silent, ferocious scream in her mind. Albright's gentle but stern warnings replayed with horrifying clarity. "Evelyn, my dear, this is a high-risk pregnancy exacerbated by your current stresses. Bed rest is ideal. Any falls, any undue physical or emotional strain could precipitate premature labor. We must be exceedingly careful." This was beyond undue strain. This was a calculated, brutal assault. The tightening in her abdomen became a vicious, unrelenting clench, a fiery fist gripping her insides. Was the baby coming? It couldn't be. Not now, not here, amidst the swirling, indifferent snow and the scornful eyes of the city, with her face stinging from the biting cold, and a shame so profound it threatened to suffocate her. Inside his rattling, rust-eaten Honda Civic, affectionately nicknamed the Tortoise by his daughter Abby for its less-than-stellar acceleration, Noah Beckett gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white bones against the cracked, peeling plastic. He was now a full 25 minutes late for Abby's school pickup, the Civic's perpetually wheezing alternator and groaning, protesting transmission, a constant metallic symphony underscoring his frayed finances and equally frayed nerves. The gas gauge hovered precariously close to E. "Daddy, look over there." Abby whispered, her voice small and tight from the passenger seat, her usually bright, inquisitive face framed by fiery red pigtails now etched with an unchildlike worry. Her well-loved dog-eared sketchpad, usually her constant companion, lay forgotten on her lap, a testament to her distress. "That lady. Her tummy looks like it's really, really hurting. And that big, mean man, he pushed her down hard." Noah's gaze already clouded with irritation. From the delay, the numbing cold, and the ever-present worry about making ends meet, followed his daughter's pointing finger. He'd registered the dealership, March Motors. Its chrome and glass facade, a monument to ostentatious wealth, seemed to sneer at their struggling, unpretentious Vermont town of Hemlock Ridge, a place where resilience was valued far more than riches. Then he saw her. A small, huddled figure curled by the curb like a broken-winged bird, the falling snow already beginning to powder her intricately braided, raven-dark hair. A visible tremor racked her small, defiant frame. Pregnant. Obviously pregnant. Freezing. and just ejected like common refuse, her few belongings scattered. A familiar rage, the kind that simmered cold, quiet, and dangerous deep within him, tightened Noah's jaw until his teeth ached. Life, he knew with bitter certainty, had a brutal, efficient, and deeply unfair way of kicking people when they were already down for the count. He knew that particular soul-deep sting intimately. A war raged within him, swift and fierce. Part of him, the part that had meticulously walled itself off, brick by painful brick, after Maggie's slow, agonizing death, screamed at him to drive on, to protect Abby from more heartache, to avoid another messy human entanglement, another inevitable appointment with pain. He was barely keeping his own head above water. But then he saw the woman clutch her stomach again, her face a twisted mask of pure agony, her breath misting in frantic, shallow puffs, and the compassionate, irrevocably broken part of him, the part that, despite everything, still remembered how to feel, how to care, decisively won. "Stay here, Abs. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone but me. You understand?" He said, his voice rougher, more strained than he intended. He pulled over the tortoise, protesting the sudden maneuver with a wheezing metallic sigh of complaint. The snow, already inches deep, crunched like broken glass under his worn steel-toed work boots. "Hey, ma'am." He began, consciously keeping his voice low and gentle, the cadence honed by years of soothing a sick, frightened wife and a perpetually worried child. He approached slowly, hands visible, not wanting to startle her further. Are you all right?" That looked like a nasty fall. Evelyn looked up, her eyes, the turbulent color of a stormy Atlantic sea, sharp with an ingrained intelligence, fiercely proud, yet shadowed by an exhaustion so profound it seemed etched into her very bones, widened in alarm. Flecks of gold in their depths, usually so vibrant, seemed to dull with pain and unshed tears. I'm perfectly fine." She rasped, the lie brittle and transparent in the frigid Vermont air, a flimsy shield against his unexpected kindness. Another wave of pain, less a sharp stab this time, and more a deep, ominous, grinding throb washed over her, stealing her breath. She pressed her lips together, white and bloodless, fighting back a moan that clawed at her throat. She spotted her spilled belongings and made a weak attempt to gather them, a wave of dizziness nearly overwhelming her. "You don't look fine," Noah stated quietly, his voice surprisingly gentle, though a muscle twitched erratically in his clenched jaw. He noted the raw, scraped skin on her visible knee, bleeding sluggishly through her torn stocking, and the way she unconsciously favored her lower back, the subtle pallor beneath her olive skin. "It's well below zero out here. That guard. Henderson, was it? Did he hurt you more than just shoving you?" His gaze, hard and flinty, flickered towards the dealership. "He said I was disturbing their sophisticated, high-net-worth ambiance." She whispered, shame and a furious, impotent anger warring for dominance, flushing her pale cheeks a painful, blotchy red. "Said my presence was detrimental to the March Motors brand integrity." She tried to push herself up, leveraging her trembling arms against the icy curb, and a sharp, involuntary wince contorted her features. Her coat, clearly expensive once, but now showing signs of wear, was tragically inadequate for the biting ferocity of a Vermont deep winter. Noah's gaze, burning with a sudden cold fury, flickered back to the showroom, a brightly lit, sterile fishbowl where oblivious, impeccably dressed salesmen, slick and predatory as sharks, preened amidst polished chrome, gleaming paintwork and ludicrous, unattainable price tags. A cold, acidic disgust churned violently in his gut. "My daughter and I were heading home, to Hemlock Ridge. Abby's got her world-famous 3-bean and roasted vegetable chili on the stove. She adds a secret ingredient, smoked paprika, swears it's the key." He attempted a small, reassuring smile. "It's warm there, real warm. And there's plenty. No strings attached, ma'am, I promise." Huffberg, He extended a calloused, oil-stained, hesitant hand. "It's just a few miles up the road. Safer than out here, that's for sure." She stared at him, then at his outstretched hand, as if it were a lifeline thrown into a raging sea. Suspicion and a raw, gnawing desperation clashing fiercely in her exhausted gaze. "Why?" She finally managed, her voice hoarse. "You don't even know me. What do you want from me? People don't just help." Another twinge, sharper this time, sharper than before, made her gasp. She bit her lip hard enough to draw a bright bead of blood that starkly contrasted with her pale skin. "I know you need help. Anyone with eyes could see that." Noah said, his voice dropping a shadow deep and undeniably painful, flickering across his weathered face. "And I know what it's like to feel like the whole damn world's forgotten you even exist, or worse, wishes you didn't." He paused, the silence heavy. "That's enough for me. More than enough. Come on, before you turn into an ice sculpture for their damn showroom." He saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Surprise, a dawning, hesitant recognition. Tentatively, as if expecting the offer to be cruelly snatched away, at any second she reached out and took his hand. It was rough, the calluses like old leather ingrained with the scent of honest work. But it was astonishingly steady, surprisingly warm, and inexplicably safe. He gently helped her to her feet, his other hand going to her elbow to steady her as she swayed. He quickly gathered her spilled items, tucking them back into her satchel. Back at their small, aging, clapboard house, worn around the edges, a little battered by time and circumstance, but radiating a palpable lived-in love and the comforting scent of wood smoke and baking bread. Abby, with a quiet, unnerving perceptiveness that often startled and humbled Noah, took immediate, gentle charge. "You should sit right here by the fire." She instructed their unexpected guest, her voice soft but firm, leading Evelyn to the most comfortable armchair in the cozy, cluttered living room. A threadbare but deeply beloved floral wingback chair that had been Maggie's favorite. Abby carefully, almost reverently, tucked a brightly colored hand-stitched quilt around her shoulders, its intricate pattern, a cheerful, chaotic riot of suns, moons, stars, and an assortment of whimsical woodland creatures. The rich, inviting scent of simmering chili, fragrant with cumin chili powder tomatoes, and Abby's secret smoked paprika, combined with the subtle, reassuring aroma of burning applewood from the old Franklin stove, filled the air, a comforting, tangible balm to Evelyn's frayed nerves and aching body. "I'm Noah Beckett, and this is my resident head chef and chief welcoming committee, Abby," he said softly, placing a steaming, oversized mug of the chili into Evelyn's trembling hands. Its earthy warmth was a welcome shock against her chilled, numb fingers. He also handed her a glass of water. "Evelyn." She murmured, her voice barely above a whisper, cradling the life-giving warmth of the mug as if it were a precious, fragile artifact. Evelyn March. A long, protracted, almost reverent silence descended upon the room, broken only by the rhythmic, reassuring tick-tock of a stern-faced grandfather clock in the narrow hall, and the insistent, almost mournful hiss of the wind-driven snow lashing against the frosty window panes. Noah added another log to the stove, the crackle and pop a cozy counterpoint to the storm's fury. Then, haltingly at first, like a rusted engine struggling to turn over, she began to speak. "I used to design them, you know. Engines, transmissions, sometimes whole cars." Her voice was flat, oddly devoid of any discernible pride or passion, like a dusty, scratchy recording of an old, forgotten broadcast. "I knew every single bolt pattern, every torque specification in a Rolls-Royce Phantom Mark IV before I was 20. I could differentiate a Bentley S2 from an S3 Continental, or a Jaguar XK120 from an XK140, by its unique ignition cough and exhaust note, alone blindfolded from 100 paces." She paused, taking a small, tentative spoonful of chili. It was surprisingly delicious. Noah, who had been carefully stirring the logs in the stove with an old iron poker, his movements economical and precise, raised a questioning eyebrow. "You actually worked for Rolls-Royce?" he asked, genuinely intrigued despite himself. I practically was Rolls-Royce, or at least a very significant driving part of March Motors' strategic design and engineering partnership with them after my father. She said, a sudden, undeniable tremor shaking her voice now, a flicker of that buried passion briefly igniting in her tired eyes. Harold March. He was a visionary, a genius. He built March Motors from a tiny greasy two-bay repair garage in a back alley into a global automotive empire. He taught me everything I know. He used to say that machines had souls, Noah. Complex, beautiful souls. And I believed him. I still do. Her hand, as if possessing a will entirely its own, moved protectively to her belly. Then he died. Lung cancer. So fast, so cruel. Her voice cracked. My stepmother, Althea Leland. She's very persuasive, extremely adept at manipulation. She convinced the board, a group of men my father had trusted implicitly, that I was emotionally volatile, dangerously unstable, incapable of rational decision-making. She twisted my profound grief, my devastation, into a weapon against me, used it as irrefutable proof of my supposed inherited mental fragility. She took a shaky sip of chili, the warmth spreading through her like a benediction. The father of my baby, Julian. He publicly agreed with her assessment, vanished into thin air the very day I showed him the positive pregnancy test, said I'd trapped him, that I was using the child to manipulate him. He even issued a statement supporting Althea's claims about my state of mind. The bitterness in her tone was a raw, open wound. Sometimes I just want to see the cars again, the old ones, the classics, not for the staggering opulence or the ludicrous price tags, but because they were him, his soul, his passion, his enduring legacy. The last time I truly felt like I belonged anywhere. The last time I felt safe. Abby, who had been quietly, intensely sketching at the sturdy, scarred pine kitchen table, her brow furrowed in concentration, piped up her pencil, scratching furiously across the paper. What's your most favoritist super special car in the whole wide entire world? Evelyn, mine's a pickup truck. A big red one. Like Daddy's, but newer. And shinier. A ghost of a smile, the very first Noah had witnessed, briefly, fleetingly touched Evelyn's lips. It was like watching a deeply frozen landscape momentarily thaw under a pale winter sun, revealing a hint of hidden spring beneath. The 1965 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud 3, specifically the Mulliner Park Ward drophead coupe, in midnight blue with a cream leather interior. Her eyes took on a faraway, dreamy look. My dad. He found one in terrible disrepair, a forgotten wreck. We restored it together in his private workshop. He let me help reupholster its original seats myself when I was just 14. Cherry red Connolly leather, meticulously piped in cream. He named her the Duchess. She was perfection. Wowzers. Abby breathed, her eyes wide, and the same startling, intelligent blue as Noah's, shining with a mixture of awe and fascination. That sounds like a queen's car. Will you teach me how to draw it with all the swirly, curvy bits and the shiny chrome? Evelyn looked at Noah, a hesitant, unspoken question flickering in her exhausted, sea-storm eyes. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, a silent permission granted. A silent acknowledgement of the connection forming between these two unlikely spirits. I would be honored to teach you, Abby. Evelyn said, her voice a little stronger now, a touch of warmth seeping into its bruised timbre. We can start tomorrow if you like. Later that night, long after Abby was asleep, as Evelyn drifted into an uneasy, pain-laced, shallow sleep, in the small, simply furnished spare room tucked beneath a veritable mountain of handmade quilts that smelled faintly of lavender and cedar. Noah stood by the frost-etched living room window. He watched the relentless, hypnotic dance of the falling snow as it continued to blanket the silent, sleeping world. He felt a subtle, almost imperceptible shift deep inside him, a reluctant, cautious, almost fearful thawing of a part of his heart. He thought long frozen solid, buried deep alongside Maggie in the cold Vermont earth. He hadn't wanted to let anyone in, truly not, since the gaping, ragged void her passing had torn in his life, in his soul. But Evelyn March, her raw, palpable pain, her quiet, stubborn, almost defiant strength, and that fleeting, incandescent flicker of her father's same fierce pride and passion he'd just witnessed. It resonated with a bruised, buried chord within him, a chord he'd thought irrevocably silenced, snapped beyond repair. He also felt a prickle of familiar, unwelcome unease. Helping her felt instinctively right, undeniably necessary. But the sheer, overwhelming scale of her apparent predicament, the rarefied world of immense wealth and insidious power she'd hinted at, felt like knowingly, deliberately walking into a minefield blindfolded with Abby in tow. The next morning, Evelyn, stiff and incredibly sore, but driven by an inner resoluteness she hadn't realized she still possessed, found Noah in the cavernous, dimly lit, cluttered shed out back. A veritable rambling museum of forgotten tools, half-finished ambitious projects, rusting machinery, and the lingering melancholic ghosts of his own numerous abandoned ambitions. He was hunched over an old, completely stripped-down Chevrolet 350 small-block engine, its heavy cast iron scarred, pitted, and deeply rusted, looking for all the world like a grievously wounded metallurgical patient on an unforgiving operating table. Sunlight, weak and wintry, streamed through a grimy window pane, illuminating dust motes dancing in the frigid air. "It's definitely not a silver cloud, not by a long shot." He set his voice a low rumble without turning the rhythmic metallic clang of a heavy wrench against unyielding metal echoing sharply in the cold, still air. "But it's got good, honest bones. Solid, dependable, unpretentious American iron. Built to last." "You're a mechanic?" Evelyn asked, her voice still husky and rough, from sleep pulling her borrowed, comically oversized, wonderfully warm flannel sweater tighter around herself. The air in the shed was thick with the unique, oddly comforting smells of cold oil, old wood metal filings, and something uniquely Noah. A faint lingering, not unpleasant scent of sawdust solvent and strong black coffee. "Used to be. Of sorts," he said evasively, his back still to her, as he tightened a stubborn bolt with a low grunt of exertion. He'd been an aerospace engineer, a goddamned brilliant one, designing incredibly complex next-generation guidance systems for deep space interplanetary satellites, intricate marvels of technology that danced with distant stars and whispered secrets of the cosmos. Then came Maggie's devastating, brutal diagnosis, the crippling, soul-crushing, ever-escalating mountain of medical bills that had bled them dry, and his soaring ambitions, his meticulously, carefully constructed life, had imploded, crashing spectacularly, ruinously, back to unforgiving Earth. He'd retreated broken and disillusioned to this quiet, unassuming corner of Vermont, to this deliberately circumscribed, quiet life, fixing failing, sputtering tractors and ancient cantankerous lawnmowers, trying desperately, futilely, to outrun the echoing, taunting ghosts of what might have been of all that he had lost of the man he used to be. He never ever spoke of it. Not to anyone. Evelyn moved closer, running a reverent, almost tender hand over the cold, pitted, rust-stained surface of the Chevy block. "Machines are honest?" She murmured, her voice soft, more to herself than to him. "They don't lie. They don't deceive. They tell you exactly what's wrong when they're broken, when they're hurting, if you only know how to listen, how to truly see." She looked at him, then a direct, profoundly searching gaze that seemed to penetrate his carefully constructed defenses, making him deeply, unexpectedly uncomfortable. People aren't always so clear, are they? So honest. Days bled slowly, almost imperceptibly, into a week, then 2, then nearly 3. Evelyn's presence, initially a jarring, unexpected disruption to their quiet, established routine, gradually surprisingly settled into the small, cozy household, like a soft, strangely welcome, unseasonal snowfall. She helped Abby with her increasingly intricate, technically ambitious car drawings, her captivating stories of legendary, often eccentric automotive designers, groundbreaking engineers, and breathtakingly beautiful, iconic classic cars, breathing vibrant, dynamic life into the girl's meticulously detailed sketches. Evelyn found a strange, unexpected solace in the simple, predictable, mundane rhythms of their shared life. The companionable preparation and sharing of meals, the quiet, fire-lit evenings filled with Abby's chatter, or the comfortable silence of shared reading, the grounding focus on simple, tangible, uncomplicated things. She taught Abby the fundamental principles of perspective and shading, explaining with patient detail how to capture the elegant sweeping curve of a vintage fender and the dazzling reflective gleam of a polished chrome bumper, the subtle nuances of light and shadow. She even, as Abby gleefully conspiratorially reported, one frosty morning started muttering in her sleep about optimum carburetor jet sizes, overhead camshaft tolerances, and the inherent superiority of a V12 engine. "I think she's made of pure car magic, Daddy," Abby had declared with wide-eyed solemn wonder, holding up a drawing of a fantastical car with wings. Real, actual magic, and she smells like old books and peppermint. Evelyn felt a part of herself, long dormant and numb, slowly, cautiously begin to awaken. The anonymous email warnings, however, continued to arrive, infrequent, but increasingly menacing. One read, "The lioness in her winter den still has claws. Do not underestimate her. Your past is not as buried as you think." Evelyn tried to dismiss them, but a seed of unease had been planted and was starting to take root. One particularly crisp, sun-drenched afternoon, Noah returned from an essential supply run to a larger town further south, a small, rather battered, anonymously wrapped cardboard box tucked carefully under his arm. He presented it to Evelyn with an almost boyish, endearing awkwardness, his cheeks slightly flushed. "Found this. Thought you might. Well, it reminded me of your story. Just open it." Evelyn's fingers, still slightly stiff and sensitive from the biting cold, despite her gloves fumbled with the knotted twine. Inside, nestled carefully on a bed of faded, distinctly crushed royal blue velvet, was a die-cast model exquisitely, astonishingly detailed of a 1965 Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud III. Its paint, a lustrous, perfect cream, its tiny interior, a rich, dark mahogany. Her breath hitched a sharp, sudden, painful intake of air that felt like a punch to the chest. Tears, unexpected, hot, and fiercely cathartic, welled instantly in her eyes, blurring the perfect, gleaming miniature. This is her," she choked out, her voice thick with unshed emotion. "The Duchess. The exact detailing, the color combination. The one my father gave me as a surprise when I turned 16. He kept a similar one, a treasured memento, on his enormous oak desk. He said it was training wheels for a future Duchess of Industry." Her voice broke completely on a sob. How in the world did you?" "Dusty old pawn shop, couple of towns over, place called Second Chances." Noah said, his gaze suddenly intensely interested in a loose floorboard by the hearth as he rubbed the back of his neck in a characteristic gesture of unease. "The owner, grizzled old fella named Sal, said it had been sitting gathering dust in his glass display case for nigh on 20 years. Belonged to some fella who'd lost everything. Sal said it looked lonely, like it was waiting for someone. Thought you might like it. Give it a good home." His gruffness couldn't entirely mask the depth of his quiet, unexpected kindness. That night, lulled by the hypnotic crackling of the fire, the comforting presence of Noah quietly reading nearby, and emboldened by his simple yet profoundly thoughtful act of kindness, Evelyn found herself telling him more. More about Harold March, the visionary, the engineering titan, the loving, if often demanding, and emotionally reserved father. More about Althea Leland, her stepmother. Beautiful, glacial, and possessed of an ambition as ruthless and insatiable as a starving wolf. She didn't just want me out of the company, Noah. That wasn't enough for her. Evelyn explained, her voice low and trembling, with remembered pain and betrayal. She wanted to erase me, to systematically, completely obliterate any trace of my father's enduring love for me, any legitimate claim I had to his legacy, to his name. She wanted to rewrite history with me expunged from its pages. She spoke, her voice cracking, of the brutal, shockingly swift, aggressive lung cancer that had stolen her beloved father from her in a matter of agonizing months. Of Althea's subsequent ruthlessly efficient corporate coup executed with the chilling, emotionless precision of a master strategist. I was drowning in a sea of grief, practically catatonic with shock and despair. And she presented my devastation to the board, to my father's supposed loyal allies, as conclusive, undeniable proof of my inherited mental fragility, my emotional instability. I shattered. I walked away, abandoned everything. My shares worth millions, the company that was my birthright, my father's painstakingly built legacy. I didn't have the strength, the will, or the resources to fight her then. She traced the elegant, sweeping lines of the miniature Duchess with a trembling finger. The memory of Julian Vance, his handsome face, his easy charm, now twisted into a cruel caricature of betrayal, burned like acid in her memory. And Julian. Althea must have offered him something irresistible to turn on me so completely, so publicly. "You didn't fight at all?" Noah asked, his voice low, carefully neutral but with an undercurrent of something Evelyn couldn't quite decipher. Disappointment, or perhaps understanding. Who was I fighting for? She whispered, the desolation in her voice, a raw, gaping, unhealed wound. Everything I knew, everyone I trusted, everything I loved was gone. Or so I foolishly, despairingly thought. There was no one left in my corner. The wind, exactly 1 week later, began to howl like a banshee, a savage, mournful prelude to the monster blizzard the meteorologists on the crackling radio had ominously dubbed Snowmageddon Prime. It commenced with an early, unnatural, almost apocalyptic twilight in the sky, a bruised, malevolent, sickly purple-black. By 7 p.m., snow wasn't merely falling. It was a solid, impenetrable, blinding white curtain driven almost horizontally by shrieking gale-force winds that rattled the very foundations of the old house. Evelyn was pacing the small, cozy living room, like a caged animal, her hand pressed almost permanently to the aching small of her lower back. "It's just Braxton Hicks contractions," she insisted, her voice tight with a forced, unconvincing calmness, but her face was a sickly greenish pale, and beads of sweat glistened on her upper lip despite the room's chill. 6 weeks early, with that level of consistent pain and that look on your face. That's a hell of a lot more than Braxton Hicks, Evelyn. Noah stated, his own voice taut with a new, sharp, undeniable fear. His gaze flicked nervously from her pain-etched face to the raging, whiteout conditions visible through the rapidly frosting window. "We're going to the hospital. Right now. No arguments." He bundled a loudly protesting, deeply sleepy Abby, already swaddled in 3 thick layers, and her favorite fuzzy unicorn blanket, into the relative safety of the back seat of his newer, marginally more reliable, but still aging Ford F-150. Then he carefully, tenderly, his arm supporting her, helped a grimacing Evelyn into the passenger seat. The old Ford's powerful V8 engine, surprisingly strong and well-maintained, sputtered and coughed in the brutal cold, but eventually roared to life, its headlights cutting twin wavering tunnels through the swirling maelstrom. It clawed its way with grim determination through the rapidly deepening, treacherous drifts. They hadn't gone more than an agonizingly slow mile, just cautiously approaching the narrow, notoriously treacherous old ironwork bridge that spanned the furiously rushing, ice-choked, inky blackness of the Blackwood River, when the truck's rear wheels spun with a terrifying, sickening whine on a large, completely invisible patch of black ice hidden insidiously beneath the fresh virgin snow. Noah, his knuckles white as bone, wrestled desperately with the unresponsive steering wheel, his muscles cording like steel cables in his arms. But the heavy, unwieldy vehicle slid a horrifying, gut-wrenching, uncontrollable slew, accompanied by a deafening, blood-curdling screech of tortured, protesting metal against unseen, unforgiving guardrails. Then, with a violent, bone-jarring lurch and a sickening final crunch of impacted metal, it slammed to an abrupt, shocking halt, tilted at a terrifying, precarious, unnatural angle. Mere inches from the steep, snow-obscured, potentially unstable embankment leading down to the churning, frigid, unforgiving river below. Noah's heart hammered against his ribs like a frantic, trapped bird. They were teetering, literally teetering, on the very brink of absolute, unimaginable disaster. The driver's side door was hopelessly, completely jammed shut against a twisted, jagged piece of the bridge's damaged railing. He twisted the key frantically in the ignition. Nothing. Only a series of despairing, utterly final-sounding clicks. Again, click, click, whir. Dead. Damn it all to bloody hell, he muttered, slamming his fist hard with all his frustrated force onto the dashboard. The cheap plastic cracked audibly under the violent impact. He fumbled desperately for his cell phone, his fingers clumsy and unresponsive with adrenaline and encroaching cold. No signal. The two mocking words, stark white against the black screen, screamed their indifference at him. Outside, the wind shrieked and howled with renewed malevolent fury, rattling the trapped truck like a child's discarded toy. And then, from the impenetrable darkness beyond the swirling snow, a new, even more terrifying sound emerged, a low, guttural, hungry growl, quickly followed by a chilling, ululating chorus of eerie howls. Coyotes, probably. Or worse, timber wolves driven down from the high peaks by the ferocity of the storm, drawn by the scent of fear, or perhaps by something else entirely. The woods around Hemlock Ridge were deep and ancient. Evelyn cried out a sharp, piercing, animalistic sound of pure agony that cut through the demonic howl of the wind like a razor. Noah. Oh God, Noah. Help me. The baby, it's coming, I can feel it. Panic, cold, sharp, and overwhelming, pierced through Noah's own considerable fear. Abby, sweetie, stay calm, honey. Stay right there, okay? Daddy's here. He managed his voice miraculously, inexplicably steadier than the raging terror he felt. He somehow managed to wrench his own passenger side door open, fighting against the suction of the wind that tried to rip it from his grasp. He stumbled out the blizzard, instantly, viciously snatching his breath, stinging his exposed face with millions of tiny, sharp ice pellets. He forced open the heavy hood, the frozen metal groaning in loud protest. His heavy-duty industrial-strength flashlight beam cut a pathetic, wavering, inadequate swath in the swirling, blinding vortex of impenetrable white. He jiggled frozen battery cables, his fingers already numb and useless, despite his thick, insulated gloves. He strained at a corroded connection and a sharp, unseen, jagged shard of metal. Perhaps a piece of the damaged bridge infrastructure sliced deeply, savagely into the fleshy part of his palm. A shocking, searing, unbelievable pain instantly followed by a sickening, gushing rush of warmth. Cursing fluently and viciously under his breath, he ripped a long strip of cloth from the truck's meager emergency kit and wrapped it hastily, awkwardly with his teeth and one hand around his rapidly bleeding palm. It was no use. The engine was utterly, irrevocably dead, and the battery likely frozen solid or completely drained. And he was bleeding profusely, the crimson stain spreading rapidly through the makeshift bandage stark against the snow. Back inside the rapidly frigid, claustrophobic cab, Abby was crying no longer quiet, but in loud, terrified, gulping sobs. Evelyn was breathing in shallow, rapid, ragged gasps, her eyes wide, dilated and unseeing, with a potent, toxic cocktail of unimaginable terror and unbearable agony. "It's coming too fast, Noah. I can feel it. It's tearing me apart. I'm not ready. I can't do this." Okay, breathe, Evelyn. Breathe with me." He set his mind racing, a chaotic, desperate whirl of fear, remembered fragments of medical knowledge and impossible calculations. He recalled with sudden, stark clarity flashes from a mandatory wilderness, first aid and emergency childbirth course he'd taken years ago, a lifetime ago, when he and Maggie had dreamed of hiking the Appalachian Trail. Deep breaths, Evelyn. Slow, deep, controlled breaths. We can manage this. We have to. He fumbled for the emergency mylar blanket, its frantic, loud crinkling deafening in the suddenly suffocating close space. The truck's pathetic, struggling heater had long since given up the ghost entirely. The bone-chilling, insidious cold was seeping in, relentlessly chilling them to the very marrow. His injured hand throbbed with a relentless, fiery, agonizing pulse. Hours, or perhaps a condensed, terrifying eternity, crawled by with excruciating slowness. Evelyn's contractions were brutal, relentless, overwhelming, each one threatening to shatter her. Noah, his face pale, drawn, and strained in the dim, flickering emergency light, held her hand, his uninjured one, gripping it tightly, trying desperately to project a calm. He was terrifyingly, sickeningly far from feeling his own warm blood, slowly, persistently seeping through the inadequate, saturated bandage, dripping onto the frozen floor mats. Abby Bless, her brave, terrified, resilient little heart, sang softly, tremulously to Evelyn, a quavering, often off-key, but fiercely determined lullaby her mother used to sing, her small voice thin, but surprisingly resolute, against the unabated screaming fury of the storm. They could still hear the coyotes or wolves closer now, their hungry, opportunistic howls a primal, terrifying counterpoint to Evelyn's gasps of pain and Abby's fragile song. A large tree branch laden with ice cracked with the sound of a rifle shot nearby, causing them all to jump. "I can't do this." Evelyn sobbed, her voice raw and broken, a violent, body-racking contraction tearing through her, arching her back against the unyielding seat. "I'm not ready. I'm going to break her. I'm going to fail her just like I've failed everyone and everything else in my miserable life." She was becoming delirious, disoriented with pain and profound fear. She felt a terrifying, encroaching faintness, the edges of her vision blurring and swimming the howls outside, morphing into Althea's mocking laughter. "No, Evelyn, you won't." Noah said, his voice rough, hoarse, with an almost unbearable surge of fierce, protective emotion, his grip tightening possessively on her hand. "You're the strongest, most stubborn, most resilient woman I've ever met. You absolutely can do this. You will do this." He thought with a sudden stabbing ache of Maggie, of her fierce, courageous, desperate battle against the inevitable, of his own crushing, suffocating, soul-destroying helplessness in the face of her suffering. I felt so goddamned useless when Maggie was sick. The raw, agonizing confession tore from him, ripped from the deepest, most guarded recesses of his soul. A ragged, bleeding piece of himself laid bare in the frigid, terrifying, intimate darkness of their shared ordeal. There was nothing I could do to stop it. Nothing. I just had to watch her fade away. The admission once uttered hung heavy and irrevocable in the frigid, charged air. Evelyn, through a blinding, swirling haze of unimaginable pain, somehow managed to focus on his face, on the anguish she saw mirrored there. Tears hot and stinging streamed unheeded down her own cheeks. My father. He left very specific, detailed instructions. She gasped out, her voice thin and reedy between the crushing, relentless pains, in his true will, that Bill Jeffries, his old loyal head mechanic from the original March Motors garage, Bill should inherit the workshop outright and a generous, secure pension, if anything ever happened to him. It was my father's quiet way of looking after someone loyal, someone who had given him decades of devoted service, his whole family. I didn't even know about that clause until Althea tried to viciously contest it after his death, claiming Bill was senile and incompetent, trying to cheat him out of what was rightfully his. Her voice trailed off as another wave of agony engulfed her. The connection and the shared, unspoken, profound understanding of loss of loyalty, betrayed of the small, desperate, incandescent kindnesses that could somehow illuminate even the darkest, most hopeless paths, tightened invisibly powerfully between them, an unbreakable elemental thread forged in shared adversity. Just as despair, black, absolute, and suffocating, threatened to completely engulf them, Evelyn let out a long, low, shuddering, almost inhuman groan, followed by a series of ragged, exhausted breaths. The intense, overwhelming, unrelenting contractions seemed to ease, just slightly receding like a monstrous, malevolent tide, leaving her limp and utterly spent. I think it's slowing, she whispered, her voice barely audible, hoarse and raspy, utterly exhausted, but miraculously lucid again. Maybe, oh God, maybe it was a false alarm. Or she's decided to wait. Dawn broke slowly, achingly, reluctantly, painting the snow-choked, eerily silent, transformed world in delicate, ethereal, almost painfully beautiful hues of bruised rose, pale lavender, and glacial gray. The storm, its fury finally spent, had passed, leaving behind a landscape of breathtaking, pristine beauty and treacherous, hidden dangers. By mid-morning, the distant, muffled but blessed, unmistakable roar of a heavy-duty snowplow, valiantly, laboriously fighting its way through the immense sculpted drifts, was the most beautiful, most overwhelmingly hopeful sound Noah had ever heard in his entire life. They were carefully, painstakingly extricated from the precariously perched, damaged truck by a grim-faced, weary team of volunteer firefighters and paramedics, and transported slowly and gingerly to the small, already overwhelmed Hemlock Ridge Community Hospital. An overworked but unfailingly kind and competent Dr. Bill Henderson, her face etched with fatigue, confirmed that Evelyn was not in fact in active, imminent labor anymore, but that the baby was indeed very keen to arrive, and the earlier episode had been a severe bout of stress-induced premature contractions. A very close call, she diagnosed gravely after a thorough examination. Strict, absolute bed rest for you, young lady, for at least a week, possibly more. And let's all collectively pray that this feisty little one decides to be patient and wait a bit longer. We'll keep you here for close observation for a few days, just to be safe. You gave us all quite a scare. A few days later, as Evelyn, pale but much recovered, was gingerly packing her small overnight bag, preparing to be discharged into Noah's continued solicitous care at his home. A sleek, impossibly glossy, almost obscenely opulent midnight blue Rolls-Royce Phantom, looking utterly alien, surreal, and incongruous against the rustic, unpretentious backdrop of the small rural hospital. And the snow-laden Vermont pines purred to a virtually silent, imperious stop directly in front of Noah's waiting F-150 in the hospital's parking lot. A woman emerged, tall, slender, and icily elegant, impeccably dressed in a severely tailored, expensive charcoal pinstripe suit that screamed Savile Row. Her bearing was as regal as commanding as the magnificent car she had just exited. Ms. Evelyn March. Her voice was crisp, cool, precise, and modulated with an upper-crust British accent that could have etched intricate designs on plate glass. I am Margaret Winslow, Senior Litigation Partner at Winslow, Finch, Atherton and Crowe of Lincoln's Inn Fields, London. I represent the legal interests of the estate of your late father, Mr. Harold March. Evelyn, pale but surprisingly composed, leaning lightly on Noah for support, stood on the icy hospital steps, the tiny, exquisitely mended die-cast Silver Cloud model clutched tightly, almost superstitiously in her hand. Your father's true last will and testament, Ms. March, has been definitively located and authenticated. Margaret Winslow announced, her sharp, discerning gaze, missing nothing, sweeping assessingly over Evelyn, and then Noah, then Abby, who was peeking curiously from the truck window. The meticulously crafted original document that Althea Leland went to extraordinary, nefarious, and frankly criminal lengths to suppress, conceal, and ultimately replace with a cleverly constructed, almost undetectable forgery. Your father's authentic will, executed shortly before his final illness, names you, Miss Evelyn March, as the sole primary beneficiary and undisputed majority shareholder of March Motors International and all its subsidiary holdings. Winslow paused, allowing the weight of her words to sink in her expression, becoming grimmer, more severe. Furthermore, she continued, her voice dropping slightly, but losing none of its steely authority. Our extensive forensic investigations, initiated by certain loyal long-term employees still within March Motors, who suspected foul play, have uncovered irrefutable evidence that Ms. Leland didn't just file false, perjured medical declarations and bribe unscrupulous medical professionals to have you unjustly, maliciously declared mentally incompetent. She actively, systematically engaged in a sophisticated campaign of corporate espionage and sabotage, subtly attempting to frame you for serious financial irregularities and fraudulent accounting practices that your father had in fact just begun to investigate within her own largely unchecked division of the company. We have also found evidence that she hired a rather disreputable firm of private investigators known for their aggressive and often illegal tactics to track your movements, harass you, and gather any potentially damaging information. Likely intending to discredit you, further or worse, ensure your permanent incapacitation or incarceration. Should you ever attempt to reclaim your rightful position or expose her extensive wrongdoing. Moreover, Winslow produced a sleek tablet from her briefcase. We also have copies of untraceable offshore financial records, indicating substantial covert payments made to a Mr. Julian Vance, the acknowledged father of your unborn child, I believe. These payments correlate precisely with the timing of his sudden, unexplained disappearance from your life, and more damnably, with his subsequent, highly publicized, damaging, and entirely false statements made to the press regarding your character and supposed mental instability. He was, it appears, handsomely paid for his betrayal. Winslow's eyes, like chips of cold blue ice, met Evelyn's. Althea Leland wasn't just trying to disinherit you, Miss March. She was actively plotting to utterly destroy you by any means necessary. The world already tilted precariously on its axis, for Evelyn seemed to spin violently, sickeningly, completely off its moorings. This wasn't just about a stolen inheritance, a corporate betrayal. It was about a cold, calculated, deeply personal, insidious plot to systematically dismantle her reputation, her sanity, her freedom, and quite possibly her life. Her stepmother hadn't just wanted her gone. She'd wanted her buried, silenced, erased from existence. The voluminous, complex legal documents later spread across Noah's scarred but sturdy pine kitchen table like a conquering army, were a bewildering, intimidating mountain of dense, impenetrable legal jargon. Intricate corporate charters, damning forensic accounting reports, sworn affidavits, and highly incriminating financial statements. I honestly believed I didn't care anymore. Evelyn whispered, her voice choked with a maelstrom of conflicting emotions, her trembling finger tracing her own name. Her father's name on an ancient, original deed for the very first March Motors workshop. A humble, beloved place filled with her earliest, happiest, most cherished childhood memories of her father, of grease oil and boundless dreams. But she tried to bury me alive, Noah. She tried to steal my father, his memory, his love from me all over again. She tried to make the world believe I was mad. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. Noah watched her, his expression thoughtful, surprisingly unreadable, yet strangely comforting. "So," he asked softly, his voice, a low, gentle rumble in the quiet room, unknowingly, incredibly. Using her father's most cherished, private, playful endearment for her. "What will you do now, Duchess? What's your next move?" I don't know." She confessed, her voice trembling with a mixture of shock, rage, grief, and a dawning, terrifying sense of immense responsibility. That world, Althea's glittering, treacherous world of shadows, lies, and brutal deceit. It almost killed me, Noah. It almost destroyed everything I was. And Julian, how could he, for money? The fresh betrayal felt like a physical blow, reopening old wounds. And how do I fight someone like Althea, someone with seemingly limitless resources and absolutely no conscience? That night, long after a restless Abby had finally fallen asleep, unable to process the enormity of the day's revelations, Evelyn, too agitated for the confines of the small house, found Noah on the frost-covered back porch, staring up at a vast, indifferent sky, littered with millions of cold, distant, diamond-sharp stars. The air was crisp, clean, and sharp as shattered glass. "You said, that first day, you used to be an engineer of sorts." She began, her voice tentative, hesitant, as she pulled her borrowed warm wrap tighter around her shoulders. "What kind exactly, Noah, if you don't mind my asking?" He hesitated for a long, pregnant moment, the silence stretching out between them, filled only by the distant, mournful sigh of the wind, rustling through the skeletal branches of the ancient pine trees at the edge of the yard. "Aerospace," he said finally, his voice low, almost a reluctant rumble, his gaze fixed on some distant, unseen point in the infinite blackness. "Guidance and navigation systems, mostly. For deep space interplanetary probes, reconnaissance satellites. Extremely high pressure, impossibly high stakes, absolutely zero margin for error." He exhaled slowly, his breath misting visibly in the frigid night air. "After Maggie got so sick, then after she was gone, the medical bills were astronomical, like a tidal wave. The constant gnawing, corrosive fear of losing her, then of losing everything we'd built. I was the lead systems architect on a critical flagship project, a new highly advanced Mars rover initiative, the Pathfinder 2. There was a catastrophic, very public launch failure, a multi-billion-dollar loss, a national embarrassment. His voice was flat, carefully devoid of emotion, but Evelyn could sense the profound, unhealed, suppurating wound festering deep beneath the carefully constructed, stoic surface. "They said it was my core design flaw, my critical miscalculation in the trajectory programming. My entire team. One of my most trusted senior engineers, a brilliant young man I'd personally mentored for years, Mark Jennings. He testified against me at the internal inquiry. Said I'd been chronically distracted, dangerously negligent, making reckless errors due to overwhelming personal stress." Noah's voice was flat, toneless, devoid of any discernible emotion. But Evelyn could sense the profound, unhealed, gaping wound beneath the carefully maintained surface. Maybe it was my fault. I was stretched dangerously thin, operating on fumes. Burned out, grieving, terrified. I honestly don't know anymore. But I couldn't face the prolonged inquiry, the endless media scrutiny, the whispers, the covert accusations, the pitying looks. I walked away. Took a substantial early retirement settlement that came with an ironclad career-ending non-disclosure agreement. Came up here to Hemlock Ridge. Traded complex rocket trajectories and orbital mechanics for rusted tractor axles and seized mower engines. He gave a short, sharp, utterly bitter laugh that held no humor. Some grand escape, huh? Turns out you can't actually outrun yourself or your ghosts. He didn't tell her the deepest, darkest part of it, the persistent, gnawing, terrifying suspicion that his protégé Mark hadn't just made an innocent mistake in his testimony, but had actively, deliberately sabotaged a key component of the guidance system, perhaps for his own advancement or under pressure from rival corporate entities, and that Noah had in part unconsciously taken the fall to protect the larger aerospace program from even greater, more damaging scandal, and to shield his remaining team from the fallout. And more chillingly, the occasional fleeting sense that someone somewhere was still quietly watching him, monitoring his subdued existence. Evelyn absorbed this another intricate, unexpected layer of this quiet, stoic, profoundly complex man revealed. They were, it seemed, a pair of broken engines, discarded and left to rust in the metaphorical junkyard of failed dreams and shattered lives. "So," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper in the vast, silent night. "We're just two damaged souls, then. Runaways hiding from our pasts, scarred by betrayals, waiting for the scrap heap." A faint ghost of a smile touched Noah's lips in the darkness. "Maybe," he conceded. "Or maybe, Evelyn, maybe we're both just waiting for the right mechanic and the right set of tools to get us running again. Maybe we're rebuildable." Days later, after a triumphant, if slightly chaotic and hilariously off-key, Abby had starred as a surprisingly convincing, if somewhat wobbly, sentient oak tree in her elementary school's annual spring pageant, Evelyn feeling a nascent spark of her old fire, her father's fighting spirit begin to rekindle within her, finally decisively made the series of momentous calls. She spoke first at length to the formidable Margaret Winslow, her voice calm, firm, unwavering, and unexpectedly resolute. Then, with Winslow patching her through, she addressed the stunned, hastily assembled interim board of March Motors International. Yes, she confirmed she would return to helm the company her father had built. But it would be on her clear, explicit, non-negotiable terms. She would lead, but for the foreseeable future she would do so primarily from Vermont, utilizing cutting-edge remote communication technology to bridge the geographical distance. She would systematically, meticulously dismantle Althea's toxic, fear-driven corporate culture and rebuild March Motors from the ground up, refounding it upon her father's true, cherished core values: uncompromising craftsmanship, unwavering ethical integrity, relentless, groundbreaking innovation, and a deep, abiding loyalty to its workforce and customers. Not Althea's brutal, ruthlessly efficient slash-and-burn, profit at any and all human cost tactics. There would be, she declared, a new dawn for March Motors. The next inevitable challenge was Althea herself. Cornered, exposed, and facing potential criminal charges, her highly paid shark-like lawyers fought back with the ferocity and desperation of enraged, cornered hyenas, leaking a torrent of fabricated, salacious, and damagingly scandalous stories to the most unscrupulous elements of the tabloid press and online gossip sites. Unstable, disgraced heiress returns to ruin father's legacy. March Motors on brink of catastrophic lunatic leadership. Evelyn March, from psychiatric ward to boardroom. But Margaret Winslow, a seasoned, brilliant, and utterly formidable legal strategist, was more than prepared. She countered every insidious lie, every poisonous innuendo, with a barrage of irrefutable, hard-hitting truths. Harold March's loving, affectionate, recently discovered private letters praising his beloved daughter's precocious, intuitive engineering talent and visionary designs. copies of Evelyn's early groundbreaking design patents filed when she was barely out of her teens, and a series of heartfelt, deeply damning videotaped testimonials from loyal, respected long-term March Motors employees whom Althea had summarily, cruelly, and foolishly discarded in her ruthless pursuit of power. The town of Hemlock Ridge, a close-knit, fiercely independent, and unexpectedly protective small Vermont community, gloriously, astonishingly rallied to Evelyn's defense as well. The local, widely respected weekly newspaper, the Hemlock Herald, edited by the feisty, no-nonsense Pulitzer finalist Marthaidson Webb Token O'Malley, ran a banner front-page story complete with compelling photographs. Our Evelyn from supposed Rolls-Royce royalty to resilient, authentic Vermont values. Pictures of her bundled up against the Vermont chill, laughing genuinely with a beaming Abby at the town's annual winter carnival, of her grease-stained, competent hands, helping a focused Noah with the old stubborn Chevy engine in his cluttered but productive shed, painted a vivid, undeniable picture of quiet, unassuming strength, profound resilience, and genuine, unpretentious humanity. Not the unhinged, dangerous instability Althea's expensive PR machine was desperately trying to portray. Althea's meticulously crafted multi-million-dollar campaign of lies, deceit, and character assassination crumbled ignominiously under the unexpected, overwhelming weight of simple, authentic grassroots humanity. There was even serious, enthusiastic talk amongst the town council of organizing a small, community-wide welcome festival, Welcome Home Evelyn and Welcome Baby Hope, gathering on the town green. Spring arrived in the Vermont mountains, tentative and shy at first, a delicate, hesitant whisper of warmth, then bursting forth with exuberant, unstoppable joy in a vibrant, breathtaking riot of tender, luminous green, fragile, hopeful blossoms, and the cheerful, insistent chirping of returning songbirds. And so too did Hope Annalise March Evelyn's daughter. A tiny, perfectly formed, fiercely vocal, and utterly miraculous being, with a surprising inherited shock of glossy dark hair. Eyes the exact, stormy sea color of her mother's, and her mother's already discernible, intelligent, determined gaze. Noah was there by Evelyn's side, his hand strong, warm, and reassuringly steady, gripping hers tightly, anchoring her throughout the surprisingly calm, swift, and uncomplicated delivery at the Hemlock Ridge Birthing Center. Evelyn with Noah's quiet, unwavering, multifaceted support. His practical skills, his emotional steadfastness, his grounding presence. And utilizing the first carefully managed, restored portion of her substantial reclaimed inheritance, bought the dilapidated, historically significant, but long neglected, old automotive livery barn on Maple Street. A cherished Hemlock Ridge landmark that had fallen into sad, near-terminal disrepair over decades of abandonment. Together, side by side, with a surprising, heartwarming, and deeply moving outpouring of support from local volunteers, skilled tradespeople offering their time and expertise free of charge, and enthusiastic well-wishers, they began the arduous, ambitious, yet joyful process of transforming it. A new, beautifully hand-carved, antique-style wooden sign soon hung proudly above the freshly painted, welcoming barn red doors. Hope's garage restoration and renewal for cherished machines and precious people. It swiftly became much more than just a business venture. It became a sanctuary. A thriving hub of community, a place where cherished, neglected vintage cars were lovingly, painstakingly, meticulously restored to their former gleaming glory, and where local at-risk kids, teenagers, often from troubled, difficult backgrounds or fractured family situations, like young Luke Peterson, a brooding, intensely quiet, incredibly talented 16-year-old with a minor juvenile rap sheet for petty theft and truancy, but with an undeniable, intuitive magic in his gifted hands when it came to anything mechanical. Could learn a valuable, marketable trade, discover a hidden passion, find a genuine purpose, a sense of belonging. A supportive community mentored daily by Evelyn's visionary world-class engineering expertise and Noah's quiet, patient, eminently practical skill and wisdom. Evelyn even found herself joyfully creatively sketching preliminary designs for a new innovative concept car. A rugged, family-friendly, environmentally conscious hybrid SUV specifically designed for the demanding terrain and variable climate of places like Vermont. Inspired by the inherent resilience and understated beauty of Hemlock Ridge and its people, she tentatively, affectionately named it the Pioneer. Abby, of course, was appointed official chief design consultant and color palette advisor. One crisp, gloriously golden autumn afternoon during Hemlock Ridge's bustling, joyous, much-anticipated annual fall festival, Evelyn stood on a makeshift, hay bale-flanked stage erected on the picturesque town green. Hope bundled snugly against the invigorating autumn chill. In a hand-knitted pumpkin orange sweater, gurgled contentedly happily in Noah's strong, loving arms. Abby, beaming with an almost comical proprietary pride, stood close beside him, clutching a ribbon she'd won for her drawing of the Pioneer. Evelyn wasn't wearing an expensive bespoke designer suit from her former life, but comfortable, well-worn jeans, sturdy scuffed leather work boots, and one of Noah's old ridiculously soft, faded red flannel shirts. "I came to Hemlock Ridge a broken woman," she said, her voice clear, strong, and carrying easily over the assembled attentive crowd of friendly, familiar faces, lost, alone, and frankly, utterly terrified. And this incredible, extraordinary town. Her gaze swept warmly, gratefully over the supportive faces of her new friends and neighbors. This remarkable, patient, honorable man. She smiled tenderly at Noah. And this incredibly special, wise beyond her years girl. She winked at Abby. "You all showed me, you taught me that true enduring wealth isn't measured by fluctuating stock prices, or by hostile takeovers in sterile boardrooms, or by the relentless expansion of sprawling corporate empires. It's found in genuine human connection. It's about carefully, lovingly rebuilding, not just beautiful classic engines, though we do a pretty darn fine job of that down at Hope's garage." She smiled a genuine, warm, open smile that reached deep into her sea-storm eyes and crinkled their corners. But rebuilding fractured lives. Ours first and foremost, and now hopefully with the work we're doing at Hope's garage, many, many more. At the distant edge of the cheering crowd, a lone figure, a sharply dressed, unnaturally pale woman, with eyes as cold and hard as glacial ice, watched for a fleeting, tense moment. Althea Leland, a venomous, fading shadow from a past Evelyn was rapidly leaving behind, before turning abruptly defeated and disappearing into the sleek, anonymous blackness of a waiting chauffeured limousine. Evelyn saw her, met her bitter, hateful gaze briefly, unflinchingly, and felt not fear, not anger, but a sudden, surprising, profound, almost overwhelming wave of quiet pity. Althea, for all her stolen wealth and ruthless power, was the one truly irrevocably trapped, imprisoned in a cage of her own making. Later that evening, as dusk painted the sky in fiery strokes of orange, purple, and rose, they sat together on their wide, welcoming porch, watching a giggling Abby and a newly confident, surprisingly talkative Luke Peterson animatedly chase elusive, winking fireflies in the dusky, fragrant twilight. Noah, after a long, comfortable silence, slid a warm, comforting arm around Evelyn's shoulders. He reached into his pocket and retrieved a small, obviously worn antique velvet-covered ring box. Inside, nestled against faded, tattered ivory satin, was not a glittering, ostentatious diamond, but a simple, elegant, beautifully hand-forged, warm yellow gold band, its surface subtly organically hammered with a texture that reminded Evelyn of flowing water or ancient tree bark. "Well," Noah began, his voice, husky, uncharacteristically hesitant, laced with a deep, raw emotion that made her heart ache and soar in the best possible way. "I know it's not exactly a brand-new Rolls-Royce Phantom or even a vintage mint-condition Silver Cloud Duchess. He managed a shaky smile. But I was sincerely hoping, Evelyn March, would you perhaps consider co-piloting this crazy, unpredictable, beautiful damn life with me permanently here in Hemlock Ridge? With our amazing girls. Building something real, something lasting, something that truly matters. Tears, warm, cleansing, and joyous, streamed unheeded, unashamedly down Evelyn's smiling face. She took the ring, its gold warm, from his hand and slid it onto her finger. It fit as if it had been forged for her alone. It's more precious, more valuable than all the diamonds in the vaults of March Motors' Noah Beckett. She whispered, her voice thick with love. Infinitely, immeasurably more. That night, long after the old house was quiet, slumbering peacefully under a blanket of stars, Evelyn sat at her father's massive, lovingly restored old mahogany writing desk, a treasured piece rescued from decades of indifferent storage. She opened her worn leather-bound journal, and by the soft, warm glow of an antique brass desk lamp, began to write, "Daddy, my dearest Papa, I finally found my way back. Not precisely to the glittering, often cutthroat world you so masterfully built, but back to the enduring, fundamental core values you so passionately, patiently instilled in me. Unwavering integrity, boundless passion, meticulous craftsmanship, a fierce, unshakable loyalty to those who earn it, and the courage to always choose the harder right over the easier wrong. And Daddy, I'm not alone anymore. Not even close. We're building something entirely new here, something strong, something true, something deeply, wonderfully grounded in love and community. Something we're calling hope. And oh, Papa, it's more than enough. It's everything. Outside, under a vast, silent, breathtakingly beautiful canopy of brilliant, uncountable Vermont stars, the warm, welcoming light from the old porch cast a gentle, beckoning glow out into the soft, fragrant darkness. From the direction of Hope's garage further down on Maple Street, the faint, distinct, contented, rhythmic, powerful purr of a newly meticulously restored vintage Jaguar E-Type engine being carefully, expertly tuned and lovingly tested, late into the peaceful night by Evelyn and Noah working side by side in perfect companionable harmony, broke the profound, comforting silence. The unmistakable, deeply reassuring, soul-stirring sound of hard-won second chances, humming strong, clear, vibrant, and full of infinite, glorious promise.